What are the two? What are the new criteria, Dan? The two new criteria.
If it's true for you,
Yeah.
and if it makes you feel good.
So if it agrees with your subjective sense of
Yeah.
right and wrong,
And
no external benchmarks whatsoever. You're self-referential.
Yeah, so-
and then does it feel good?
Right. So if we take the full set of potential behaviors that a person can engage in, we've just eliminated 90% of them as potentially making you feel any guilt, because you're only going to do the things that you think are right and that make you feel good.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fireside Chat, a production of Allen Creek Community Church, or AC3 as we like to call ourselves. In today's discussion, we want to dive deeply into a topic of concern for disciples of Jesus or for those who are investigating faith in Christ, so we can chart a path of faithfulness in a world of uncertainty. To that end, we hope this conversation sparks your interest and your learning. If you want to see more content like this, please like and subscribe, and we look forward to reading your comments below and getting your take. Now, let's begin.
Hey everyone, welcome to Allen Creek's Fireside Chat. Not to be too literal, but this is Allen Creek's video podcast. And this week, our topic is called In the Mind. Rick, you've got something heady and intellectual.
Not really. It's based on, it's a survey, Dan.
This is a survey.
It's so heady.
So it's science.
Super heady stuff. But Eddie,
Science.
this is from Carrie Nieuwhof Ministry, kind of a leadership guru from my home country of Canada. And anyhow, just looking kind of at the average person who would describe themselves either as maybe spiritual but not religious, post-Christian, unchurched, and saying, what are they like? What are they like as opposed to what maybe we think that they're like? And I think that's critical for us, Dan, just because I think this kind of material helps us set the table for who is God calling us to reach. We should know them, right? Like we talk about this in our membership class. When Paul goes to Athens and wants to talk to them about Jesus, you just really realize that he gets to know them first.
Because he's going to a bunch of Greeks.
He's going to a bunch of Greeks, and he's a Jew. Now, he understands Greek culture really well, but he kind of wants to know them, like the Athenians specifically.
So he wanders around.
He studies them a little bit. Well, looks at their religious
Ubers up to the Pantheon. Talks to the Uber driver.
Exactly.
Goes in and gets a euro.
Reads a few plaques.
Reads a few plaques.
So a few of those things, and kind of gets to know them. Well, wouldn't that be good for us, to kind of just say, okay, if we are as a church are trying to be a safe place where we direct these spiritual but religious people to become fully devoted followers of Christ, we should know what they're like. So sometimes that grates against the assumptions we have of what they're like. Sometimes we probably understand them because we're in relationship maybe with several people who describe themselves that way. So here's 15 characteristics, Dan.
15?
We're gonna go through pretty quick.
This will describe them in totality.
This is a lot. So it's going to be, you don't have to agree with good old Carrie here. So you either agree, Dan, or disagree.
Okay.
And comment. Why?
All right. Agree will be
number
patterned pillow. Disagree, solid color.
Okay, very good. So number one, they don't all have big problems.
They don't all
have big problems. Is that an agree?
Yeah.
Okay.
They don't all have big problems.
Right. Yeah. So you're waiting for unchurched people to show up because their life is falling apart. You might wait a really long time.
You don't know Jesus, then your marriage is a wreck and your finances are terrible. You have no morality whatsoever. And how long have you been an alcoholic?
Yeah, exactly. So
that's not true.
If we only would speak to discontent or crisis, we're probably going to miss most of our neighbors who maybe aren't even thinking that they need this.
Yeah.
That relates to number two. Number two, they feel less guilty than you think. Agree, disagree, why?
They feel less guilty. He's phrasing all these in the negative.
I know.
Takes me a second.
You think.
They feel less guilty than I think they feel. Yeah, I'm going to go for sure.
Yeah.
Guilt is way out of fashion. Guilt is like neon color.
Yeah.
Guilt is like Nike caps, and it's way out of fashion.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's because I know fashion, baby.
Yeah. It's like
I would
grunge bands and so forth.
I mean, the folks I interact with, there would be a subset of the population who I think are dealing with shame in a new way. But I think this is a very kind of specific thing.
Yeah.
And they're talking really about childhood experiences, like adverse childhood experiences. And I think that's different than people feeling like, gosh, I'm not sure I'm living up to.
That was probably wrong.
Yeah, I shouldn't have done that thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think people feel a whole bunch of guilt.
Well, that would just make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? I guess with the kind of current moral climate we're living in, which is kind of specifically to so uplift acceptance, like accept me.
Yes.
That we tend to really get fuzzy on whether behavior is honorable or dishonorable.
Yeah.
We got to put that in a separate box and say, well, I accept, and it causes fuzziness about whether behavior is good or bad, and therefore, if you're not thinking about the goodness or badness of how you're acting, you're not going to have anything to feel guilty about.
Well, and really, in addition, there's no external standard to measure it against.
Right.
The two criteria are, is it true for you?
Yes.
And does it feel good?
Yes. Yeah.
And if it meets those two criteria.
Boy. Say that again. What are the new criteria, Dan? The two new criteria.
If it's true for you.
Yeah.
And if it makes you feel good.
So if it agrees with your subjective sense of right and wrong, no external benchmarks whatsoever. You're self-referential.
Yeah. So,
and then does it feel good?
Right. So if we take the full set of potential behaviors that a person can engage in, we've just eliminated 90% of them as potentially making you feel any guilt. Because you're only going to do the things that you think are right and that make you feel good.
All right, so let's move. We're going to camp here for just another second, because now, how do we bridge from that's the baseline? How are we bridging this trans-historical message of Jesus to that setting?
You want to try and fix it.
I want to know. Just give me some clue as you think about explaining the historic message of Christ. It's almost like you have to begin by making a case for the bad news before you can make a case for the good news, because the good news is offensive to people who aren't guilty, who don't feel guilt.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Yeah, it's like, well, how's that working for you?
Yeah,
the old Dr. Phil line.
You can be very pragmatic.
Yeah, and it's like, well, it's working great for me. How's it working for us?
Yeah.
How's that working for society?
Yeah.
Things are going up and to the right, you think, generally, and where do you think that is?
Almost everybody at that meta level would go, yeah, this isn't
Things
working
are not,
for me.
and especially younger folks, who I feel a deep sympathy for, because things aren't looking good. And you and I are old enough to remember what it was like to go, you know what? We got a shot at it,
Yeah. Well, we could live better than our parents.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Children are feeling not.
But I think there's also a cognitive point, and it really depends on who you're talking to. I mean, that's kind of a heartfelt gut thing. It's like, how's this working?
Yeah.
But I think on a cognitive level, you've got to kind of address the idea that, well, really, that's you have another set of filters that you're not revealing, because not. If Michael over there, he does the thing he really thinks is good and he likes it, but it costs me $1 million, well, that can't be right. So there's a point at which your criteria comes up against my criteria.
Yeah.
And they're all over social media explaining to everybody else how they're doing bad things.
Right.
They're just doing what they think is true.
Yeah.
And what makes them feel good. So there's a lie underneath it.
So that's part of it, to explain that lie.
Yeah, to have a dialogue about that.
Yeah.
It's like there's a misappropriation, misapprehension.
Yeah, that sounds good. So, and that's probably a great place to start, because it begins with the presumption. Okay, let's imagine that the only real moral benchmark here is just, like you said, just sort of acceptance of my own inner sense, perception. It's like the airplane. The guy who was flying on the airplane, and who was very upset about the fact that it was going through a lot of turbulence, and he finally wanted to get with the pilot and explain that he wasn't flying correctly, and he manages. This is in the era before terrorism, and he gets an audience with the pilot. The pilot says, "So don't worry, sir. Do you see that red light on the left wing there? Yep. See the red light on the right wing over there? Yeah. As long as we fly between those two red lights, we're doing fine." And the guy goes back, greatly comforted. Right?
Yeah.
Like self-referential. He's like, as long as we're flying between the two red dots that belong to me, I'm doing just great.
Doing
like, no, you need something objective outside of you, an outside reference point. So exposing the the flaw.
Self-referential nature of
and the flaw in that. Yep,
and that's got to be done with
obviously
with love and gentleness and dignity.
Yeah. So number 3. This obviously I think applies to church people as well, but occasional regarding being at church is regular. So if they do decide to try out church again, they don't attend every week. In fact, often very rarely. Giving them easy, obvious strategic steps to get connected would be very important. They're already giving you a little what to do about this. So it is occasional is regular.
Yeah, I think we found that.
Didn't we find that out about church people?
Yeah, I think the last hard statistic was, last one I know of, and it's pretty old, regular amongst Christians, self-identifying Christians, regular church attendance is 1.3.
Yeah.
1.3 times a month.
And COVID, and that might have been a pre-COVID stat.
I think that was pre-COVID.
So yeah, I think this is sort of old news for us a little bit. It's like, yeah, then this is all, COVID changed the ball game for churched people. Yep. So more so, certainly. Okay, well, number 4, most are spiritual, Dan.
Yeah, I think.
Like, I think that grooves with, what's your pill? You forgot your pill.
Yeah, no, I did.
Okay.
Yeah,
you did. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think most of it, like we even talked about that, where we used to identify people in this category as sometimes seekers, but we decided that our language there probably needed to be more specific, because sometimes they aren't seeking, but they describe themselves as spiritual but not religious, and that's a term they would embrace often. Yeah, and it's not one they would find derogatory.
Yeah, and honestly, I can't think of a single true materialist that I know personally.
Yeah.
I know people who lean solidly in that direction.
Yeah.
But when you get into dialogue, you find, oh no, there's a non-corporeal component to their worldview as well. So that's technically spiritual.
Right.
So I think most people recognize, in countless conversations, sure, I think there's probably something behind it all, but I don't know for sure what it is. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, there's a spiritual component.
Yeah. So maybe we've been a bit misled by the rise of the new atheists and the rise in the nuns, that gives us a sense that, people who now disassociate with Christianity are godless heathens or something like that. Whereas really that's not the way they would look at them.
No, those guys are disproportionately represented on the internet.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, they're trolling the internet.
Just, in their mom's basement, spending a lot of time. Actually,
in way larger effect than their numbers would indicate. Yeah,
I think so.
So that actually, there's something about that we can play to, right? I think we're finding that at AC3 that, a person who's spiritual can come into a setting where there are followers of Jesus who are discussing very big ethereal concepts about God, about identity, even in worship, diving into mystery. Mm-hmm. That wouldn't automatically be something that would say, I can't even.
No, we've got people attending AC3 right now who, are perfect. I'm not a Christian at all, but gosh, I'm really intrigued by the spiritual environment that's here, and they want to be around it.
And that would make sense, since we believe that people are made in the image of God, whether they believe in God or not. Right?
Absolutely.
Number 5, they are not sure what Christian means.
I'm not sure what Christian means.
See, you can't make any assumptions about what people understand about the Christian faith. In most cases, the unchurched may have more issues with a particular brand of Christianity, and this gets back to the series we had on deconstruction about whether a brand of Christianity that's hyper-partisan, so they may not understand Christianity as a distinct from a hyper-partisan version of it.
Right. Like I saw something go past the news feed about the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who's apparently, I never heard his name till he became Speaker of the House. Mm-hmm. So I know nothing other than these little bits. But apparently, he's a young Earth creationist, right? So for those of you who may not know, that if he is, unconfirmed report, if he is, then that means he holds to a literal interpretation of the Genesis narrative, which means that the earth was created in 7 solar days, somewhere between 7 and 10,000 years ago. Okay, so anybody who is on the outside of the Christian church, looking in on that is going to just lose their minds over that. Now, inside the church, I think we have room to be gracious and maybe disagree on those sorts of things and not get all worked up. But so somebody's going to say, well, if that's Christianity, I want nothing to do with it. So yeah, is that what it means to be a Christian? Does it mean I have to vote Republican? Does it mean I have to homeschool my kids? And, you know, what, do they issue me a gun now? I mean, you have to have a gun if I'm a Republican or a Christian, that sort of thing. And none of all that stuff's baloney.
Yeah, exactly. So decoupling Christianity is probably a pretty, you know, in terms of what do we, okay, if this is true, what do we do about it? Maybe that's part of our job as followers of Jesus, explaining Christianity, to decouple it from baggage that is not inherent to the historic gospel.
Yeah, and cultural expressions of it. It's to be a Christian in China is going to look pretty different than being a Christian in America.
Number 6, you can't tell them back. You can't call them back to something they never knew. So this is an important thing. Okay, so agree, disagree. You can't call them back to something they never knew.
So, well,
so now
I'm going to go agree because I think I know where he's going with this. But
yeah, so we are now on the 2nd to 5th generation of unchurched people. So to use a word, he uses, I think this is really pretty insightful. To use a specific word, revival, is revive to what? Revive the old spiritual deadness?
You know, back when everybody was a Christian.
Like Dan, what you need is a revival of the faith of your fathers. It's like your father had no faith.
My father was not a man of faith.
No,
and his father was definitely not a man of faith.
So to revive that, like it's an incoherent idea, right?
Absolutely.
And your experience was a bit, non-typical in a more churched America, let's say 50 years ago, but now your experience is typical today. Therefore, you know, some sort of, you know, you can't, we're going to call you back to Jesus, you know, let's take the country back to what? So yeah, I think that's probably pretty insightful. So adjusting our language of, you know, revivals, like to be, you know, we're more calling people to life. Yeah. Number 7, many have tried church even a little, but left.
I'm going to disagree with him on that. I don't think many have tried church. I think 75%.
Just to make up a number. Yep, got it.
Of Americans have attended a church service, but I don't think they've tried church and left.
Yeah. Oof, that's good. Okay, so what's the Lewis quote I'm thinking of? Christianity has not been...
Was it Lewis or was it Chesterton?
Oh, Chesterton, you're right. Thank you.
It's not that Christianity has been tried and found wanting. It has not been tried.
It's been found hard
and not tried.
And left untried. Yes, that's right. Yeah. I think that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I think they've attended a church service or two. They've got Christmas, maybe taken in a...
So something weird happened, or something that was difficult, a question they came up with, or I think more often, they got just far enough to get their nose bent out of shape, maybe a relational sticking point or something like that, and then it was like, that's it.
Or just, you know, it's like, look, let's be as generous as we can with this imagined person, and let's say they really listen and take a good preacher at their word, they're going to receive a dangerous call. They're like, we're calling you to sign up for a life change. And they're like, wow, I'm not interested in that.
Like many of the people who listened to Jesus.
Yeah, and walked away when he said, oh yeah, you're going to have to eat my body and drink my blood.
Yeah.
Which is a way of saying, I'm it. You know, it's like, this is everything. And they're like,
I don't
think they ran screaming. I think they probably did a little beard stroking and they said, I don't know. I'm not interested in that.
They counted the cost and said no.
Yeah, and I think the most generous interpretation. I think there's a bell curve, and I think on the right side of that bell curve would be people who maybe listened to the message and said, nah, I'm not sure I buy into that. The middle of the curve is people who are like, this just doesn't. This doesn't do anything. We go back to this idea that they run it through a grid that says, truth is what I make it, and I do what makes me happy.
Right.
Well, this doesn't feel...
Doesn't work for me.
Boring, and it's asking things of me. Why would I do this? That's the top of the bell curve.
Yeah.
And then the other side would probably be people who are openly hostile.
Right, right. Number 8, their definition of generosity is different, because even giving 10% of your income to anything is radically countercultural. The only paradigm of giving the unchurched have is a few dozen or $100 to select charities.
I don't know.
Ah, I like it. He's got the I don't know sign.
I kind of want to say yes, but I don't really have good evidence to form an opinion about that. My sense is that, yeah, that charitable giving outside the church, well, the problem is charitable giving inside the church is not stellar.
It's also plummeting. Yeah, I mean, and it was under around 10%. This was 20, 30 years ago. But I can tell you, I think that maybe he's pointing out a shift that is discernible. And I'm more church than you are. So when I was in my church upbringing, to talk about giving 10%, like literally, you take your income, chop it up into 10 hunks, give one of these back to God every month. Yeah. That was not radical. It was not countercultural. It wasn't.
You didn't have to teach on it regularly.
Really, I just like that's what you do.
And controversial.
Yeah, the word tithe means 1/10. It was in the name, and now it's like 10%. Like nobody does that. Muslims are required to give like 1.8%. Like I mean, in terms of a religious sort of standard that would be explicitly talked about in the Quran. In scriptures, that benchmark is, and we can talk about the theology of the tithe another time, but generally that was obviously the standard in the Old Testament, and to newbies, to people who are just looking at this, 10% is a big chunk.
And I guess maybe kind of to back into an answer, I'm going to go yes, is the way we felt we've had to teach on this, which is very gently, because if we just laid that out, like, hey, here's kind of the stand, I mean, what, hey, here's the deal, and this is what the Bible teaches. Paul says, give generously, give with an open heart, give what you can, not what you can't, not under compulsion, and so we never felt like we had to drive that home, and it felt good because I think if there was a solid teaching in there, it would be a hard sell.
Yeah, and we've tapped into the principle of Malachi, where the tithe is talked about as a benchmark. Test God in this. Like I tell people, like, if God's calling you to generous giving, look, the tithe seems like a massive jump. Trust Him with something more than what you're doing now. Because I don't think that anyone can read the ministry of Jesus and think that the giving benchmark for Christians is less than it would be for Jews, or for an Old Testament legal system versus a heart-won system where I'm just won to Christ by His lavish, crazy generosity. And I go, yeah, probably I should be much stingier than if, God says, give a tenth or die. Like, it's like, in a grace-based system where we've been won by radical sacrifice. Like, that is the definition of our religion, that our standards of generosity should be less, but like you're saying, to teach it in such a way that it could be climbed into as a faith experience rather than as a legalistic experience, something like that. Number 9, they want you to be Christian. They may not want to be Christian, but they sure want you to be one.
I'm not sure where he's driving at that.
I'll give you the first.
Yeah, because I would say in one way, no. I think there's an increasing annoyance and intolerance.
I wasn't thinking about that, but I see where
he means. It's like, no, your truth. You can do your thing, or I appreciate the stuff you do. Well, let's see what he says.
Well, he means that they want you to follow Jesus authentically. What they do understand of Jesus, they like, and they think that most Christians don't follow that.
They might be right.
So they don't think Christians follow what they think they know of Jesus, which may be partly right and partly wrong. Right. It may be that the entire summation of Christian ethical teaching is judge not, lest ye be judged. Boom. It's like, no Christian who does that. They're all judgmental.
Yeah.
And therefore they don't want you to, or they want you to be more like Jesus because they have such a truncated vision of Jesus. Whereas if you live by Jesus' marriage model, by his love your enemies model, by turn the other cheek ethic, by his call to the tithe, and then they would say, no, please don't be more Christian because your view of marriage is abhorrent to me.
Yeah, that's complicated.
It is.
Yeah.
So they want you to be Christian as they define Christianity, or they want you to be Christian as they define the things they like about Jesus, which is probably Sermon on the Mount stuff, turn the other cheek, love your enemies, love your neighbor.
Yeah.
So number 10, they're intelligent, so speak to that.
I'm going to be nice. Yeah, but I've met a lot of dummies inside and out of the church, and I think we're getting dumber.
Yeah.
Everywhere, not just the just.
Oh, well, let's go. Yeah, I think I know what you mean. It's not like the intelligence quotient is going down, but the level of ignorance is staggering. And when you think about like arguments that are made that are just, and generally when people I'm not even going to go into one, but just issues that rely on historical arguments, and they just don't know their facts. They just don't know context. They don't know anything about the context of what they're talking about.
I'm reminded of two memes, and I don't know if our producers can find them, and if they can pop them up if they find them.
Yeah.
And one is the old-timey guy who's looking at a painting or looking at a book with this expression like, what? That's meant to represent confusion, and the other one is a black lab dog. Have you seen it with its? It just has this look on his face like, huh? And and this is what these are my responses to journalists.
Oh yeah,
I mean, these are people who are university educated, and they get paid lots of money, and it's like nobody taught you how to critically think.
Yeah.
Nobody taught you how to just put together a Venn diagram, or
So you're kind of
I'm
disagreeing with this one a little bit. And I know you're not insulting unchurched people, because I think you're saying this is ubiquitous to the culture.
This is everybody,
and you're obviously not calling people unintelligent. What you're saying is there's an ignorance and a lack of training in just good reasoning. Right? Yeah. Here are premises: premise A, premise B, premise C, conclusion.
Yeah.
And then you disagree with the conclusion by proving one of the premises wrong.
Because increasingly it's like, I really feel strongly about this, so it's true.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I just presented evidence to the.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a hater, or you're a
totally
lib, or whatever. I mean, it's
before you get into more trouble. Number 11, they hate hypocrisy.
Everybody hates a hypocrite.
Everybody hates hypocrisy.
Those are the people that it's okay to hate.
That's right.
Everybody hates a hypocrite. Good thing I'm not a hypocrite.
The language, just now with the conflict that's going on, I'm not going to say it because we're timestamp this thing. But yeah, everyone hates hypocrisy. We live in a cynical, distrustful era. And any scent of hypocrisy is going to send an unchurched person rushing to the exit. Most of us are already primed to expect the worst from religious organizations. So live with integrity and challenge your congregation to do the same.
Okay. I think some things at work, though, too, it's like they don't run from hypocrisy everywhere. If they, they'd just be running all the time, from everywhere, because there's hypocrites everywhere.
Right.
I mean, my gosh, look at politics.
Yeah.
And yet we have people who are engaging in partisanship, and they're surrounded by hypocrisy.
Yeah. Yep.
And it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're surrounded by them.
Yeah.
But they don't run from that. They don't run from their own hypocrisy. I think it has something to do with an innate understanding that the call of Jesus, there's something to that. And anyone who looks at it with any objectivity realizes it's a very high call. And so any departure from that is glaring. Whereas,
right.
So you're a senator. Of course you're gonna be taken. So you're a Supreme Court judge. Yeah. Of course you're gonna get expensive vacations and RVs, and right. Everybody knows.
Right.
There's a cynicism.
Yes.
That allows for, you have to account for a certain hypocrisy in all these areas, but when it comes to the church, there's no margin for hypocrisy there.
Right.
And I don't fault them.
Yeah, like why should we not hold ourselves to the higher standard? Yeah. Okay, well that relates probably to number 12. They love transparency, which may be the antidote we're talking about. That there are people who we presume, if we presume, like you're saying, that everybody is failing at living up to what they say they believe, and you're saying, wouldn't you just dive into just a raging cynicism about everything, like you're saying, like it's everywhere, unless through transparency, the failures to live up to my chosen set of values or beliefs can be exposed. I just like, yep, you know what, I failed there. I wanted to live the high call, I didn't, and here's me, the open book, admitting it is different than, yeah, and I always do that, but don't look at my my books or the private conversation I'm having in my marriage or whatever.
Right. It's a phrase I think you coined recently, which is the difference between a failure and a fraud.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mixed. My answer is going to be mixed. I think we want to encourage honesty and transparency, and I think it's alluring and it's winsome and disarming. But there's what growing alongside it is a kind of intolerance that you hear. It's like your apology. This is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. Right. There needs to be a pound of flesh. You have to be punished. So apologies are gone over with a fine-tooth comb. And did you get the talking points right? And so there's
that's what you're talking about, unforgiveness.
Yeah.
Like that there's just such a rank cynicism about failure that I've now just gone, you know what, I can't forgive you. It's beyond the pale.
It's unacceptable.
It's beyond the pale. I cannot even come back.
You're canceled.
Yeah, you're canceled. Yeah, exactly. It shows up in cancel culture.
And
people can fall on their sword, authentically so. And it's like, nope. There's no coming back from that. You've been cast into the untouchable.
And everybody, there was a time where, this group was accusing the other group of being cancel culture, and now it's like, oh, well, okay.
Yeah,
everybody does this now.
Yeah. So they want you to be honest about your struggles with life. When Christians talk about how God took all my problems away and everything is awesome now, they know that's not true. So that's what they're talking about in terms of the authenticity piece, right?
Yeah.
Like be real, because we know that the gilded gloss you put over your Christian life is probably not true.
Yeah.
So number 13, they invite their friends if they like what they're discovering. In other words, they're salespeople for anything that they love.
Yeah, I think that that's been shown to be the case in almost 30 years of doing ministry. It's like the people who have these radical encounter with Jesus and get their life turned upside down, they're the ones, they're just going everywhere. It's like, you
got to get in on this.
I mean, that's just human nature.
Yep, it's beggar who found bread type stuff. You find that in the scripture, So that's kind of exciting when you think about just the viral nature of, on the good side, when people get their lives turned upside down by Christ. And number 14, their spiritual growth trajectory varies dramatically.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, that's very controversial. Like one size does not fit all.
Yeah, and maybe he's addressing an inside the tent.
Well, he's talking about, what you do then with folks who are showing interest in the gospel or community or church or somewhere in the periphery of your church's ministry. How do you on-ramp them? And not all the same way is the presumption behind this observation.
I think that's good. And maybe he's addressing, it would be an old-timey problem. I hope it's less of a problem now.
Yeah.
You're interested in this. You're going to take our discipleship class, which takes 6 weeks, and then you're going to be baptized. You're like, well, wait a minute. I have more. I thought you loved Jesus. Whoa. And for some people, it's going to be, we have people who have attended our church for decades.
And have not become members.
And have not, and they kind of, I refer to it as a very elliptical orbit.
Yes.
And it's not just about their attendance. It's kind of about their interest in Jesus. And
others about 3 weeks, and it's like, how can I,
sign me up.
Sign me up.
Can I be the Pope of this whole thing?
Can I be an elder now? Or,
everybody's different, and those paths are all different, and we need to be everybody's welcome in the community.
That's cool. And then a church that has multiple jumping in points and multiple on-ramps into the life of the church. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, and finally, Dan, number 15, some want to be anonymous and some don't.
Those are the two choices.
So it's like, well, how would you disagree with that?
Yeah.
No, they all want to be. Well, I guess that's how you do it. And now, actually, that is actually interesting, because when you say that, and we talked about this before, but it bears repeating. When you say that, maybe there's another time in AC3's history where he said, we're gonna treat every genuinely unchurched person like they want to be anonymous.
That was our default.
Even if they don't, we're going to treat them like they do.
Yes, we're going to default to the idea that if they come through the door, they want to be anonymous.
As opposed to, and we set ourselves apart from, we thought, other ministries which treated like everybody like they didn't want to be anonymous, as if that wasn't even a thing.
Yeah.
And we thought we knew something. When we thought, no, actually, imagine you were invited to a mosque or a synagogue. You might want to just sort of hang out and observe.
Can I just shadow this?
Yeah. It's a great word.
Yeah.
So some do, some don't. Dan, describe that, because that's a shift in our approach, to assume that some don't want to be anonymous.
Yeah, I think I would guess, and I'm speculating, that some of it has to do with the increasing isolation people are experiencing.
I think you're right about that.
And I think in the early 90s, it was the pre-internet, very early internet days. It was just a different culture, a different world. And people had these connections. And so walking through the doors of a church, they weren't there necessarily to get relational needs met. It wasn't foremost on their mind. What was bringing them through the door were perhaps existential questions, experiencing psychic, emotional pain, that sort of thing, maybe.
Yeah.
Now, people are like, and I had somebody say this to me this last week.
What?
I just want to be part of a community.
Wow. And so not a follower of Jesus.
This is non-Christian. I just want to be part of a community. I want to connect here.
Wow.
And so they're not really concerned with the doctrine, and I'm not necessarily interested in that, but they want to connect. So that is in direct opposition to anonymity.
Exactly.
So they're coming in, they're like, okay, great, here, I got a donut. Who can I talk to?
And you cannot describe that person, if I know what you're talking about, as churched. Like, that's the little churched person in them talking. No, this is genuinely unchurched person.
I don't think they're churched.
Very little background. Yeah. But they're hungry to be known.
Yeah.
They do not want anonymity. So that's a fascinating case study.
I think that might account for some of it. I don't know if it accounts for all of it.
Yeah. So, well, there you go. We have a picture now inside the mind. And that gives us, I think, some handholds for how we as individuals talk to our neighbors, what we assume about them, and how we go about getting to know them and introducing them to our life with Jesus and our life here as the family of God at AC3.
And if I'm not mistaken, I just said they're all dumber. Did I say that?
You did get you got in trouble there. We're going to get letters. But I think we know what you're talking about, Dan. I think
from our tens of followers.
You were throwing the educational system under the bus. We're not training great thinkers out there, which I think, to cycle back to that point, there was something that was in my mind I didn't say. I think that as a to-do, like if we agree with you, not that people are unintelligent, but that perhaps our ability to have good reasoning skills are diminishing, that some of our work then is to help people to think through these issues and actually to frame their questions for them. I can't tell you how many times in investigations people give me a question that I think, I'm going to use your word. This is Dan's word, not my word. This is Dan's word. Dumb questions. And like I said, let me help you smarten up that question. So for example, they'll say, I can't trust the Bible because it's been translated so many times. And I go, that's not a great question, because imagine I can't trust the phone book because it's in German. What? Why? Because it was translated. No, the issue is transmission. So we can help people do that. Yeah. And I think as it relates to what you made the observation, I'm rescuing Dan out of this. You didn't say people are dumb. You didn't say that.
I don't think I said that.
No. So we don't think you're dumb, especially if you click subscribe.
Pound that!
Pound that subscribe button. Anyhow, I'm so glad you guys hung out for this conversation about people that God loves and for whom Jesus died. So we will see you here next time on Fireside Chat. Bye-bye.
Dummies.
Ha! You did it!
Love you.
You're the worst.
I am.